Today we have a shared session about electronic reporting, and the first part will be taken over by me, and then I will switch over to Yevgen, my co-presenter. And maybe Yevgen, you want to introduce yourself shortly?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Yevgen. I'm a technical solution architect, work for Fusion 5 New Zealand. Yep. And as Ludwig said, I will be presenting the second part of the session, talking about how you use an electronic reporting to import your bank statement. And now back to Ludwig.
Yep. So I will take over the first part, and here's my name and my contact details if you have questions later on. Yeah? So today's agenda is basically a short one. So the first part, the first three bullet points here, this will be related to electronic reports, electronic documents in Dynamics. So some kind of invoices, sales order documents, and whatever you have in Dynamics. Yeah? And we will demonstrate how you can make them dynamic and update them quickly. How you can change and update corporate designs for multiple companies. Then we'll have some funny part with some blinking and shining windows. And then Yevgen will take over and show you some real business value when it comes to reconciliation of bank statements, because that's an issue that many companies have, and he will demonstrate you how you can leverage electronic reporting for that. Okay, so let's get started. The first part that we want to cover is, well, how can you dynamically update your electronic reports? So the question is, whenever there is a change in the design requirements of your company, then the question is, how can you update all of your documents at once and not just going through one after the other, but just using some kind of smart setup that helps you avoiding all these manual tasks. Yeah? And well, here is basically the solution. But let us jump into Dynamics and have a look at how this works in reality. So let us quickly have a look at the demo machine where we configured all of that. So Russ, can you quickly confirm whether you see a Microsoft Finance and Operations machine?
Excellent. Yes, we do. Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. So this works. So we get started here in the electronic reporting workspace. And the first thing that I want to show you is that we have a kind of, let's say, invoice document design. And then because of maybe some mergers, some acquisitions, or some marketing changes, you have to update your electronic reports. And what you usually have to do is you have to go here into this long tree. Then you have to look out for your invoice documents. So I will demonstrate this based on a free text invoice document, but you can think about any kind of document, sales order, project invoice, kind of packing slips, whatever you have. And the document that I will use and show you in the following is this one. It is here a free text invoice, and the attached document that we use, this looks like as follows. So if I scroll down here, it says free text invoice, and it has some Lego icons with Star Wars on top. So basically, let me open a second session that we do not have to switch all the time. So if I use this kind of document for my customer, let me jump to my customers, then I can link this document in the print management. So this is the customer that I use and prepared for this demo. And if we go into the print management, then you will see that in the free text invoice section, we have this report format. And this is just one example. You see the other elements. So you can do the same for customer invoices, collection letter notes, payment advices, and many other documents. So if I just create an invoice for this customer, let's do that quickly. Should not take too long. So let me just enter here an invoice. Let's say $8,000. Post it, and then print it. And please note that I use here this print management settings, so that the invoice document is directly printed. The output in my example should be an Excel document, but it can be also converted automatically into a PDF document. So this is what you see. And the first question is possibly, where did this different Star Wars icon here on top come from? Well, and the answer is, we configured this in the organization in the organization admin module in the legal entity. So let me show you that. If I go into my legal entities, there's an icon, this one here, that is used for the invoice. Well, the question then is, how did we link this one to our electronic document? Well, and the answer is simple. So if we are back in the designer and have a look at the model and the report configuration, then we entered here as a separate cell that is called picture. LRE is my name, and then picture, and we combined it with the base invoice document, the base invoice information, and here we have an information about the company, and there is something called logo. So this is the company logo that is dynamically bound to this element, and whenever you make a change to this logo here, then your business documents will be updated. So let's try that. So let's change this document and search for a different one. I might have one that is possibly with a different Lego banner. So this one here, it has a different design. So I change this one. Let's save it, and then let's create another invoice and see whether it will be grabbed up by this configuration. So I go back to my customer. I create a new free text invoice. Just use here a sales account, $5,000. I post it, and then I will also directly print it. And the expectation is, of course, now that this new picture will be shown and displayed on top of our invoice document. So once it's opened, yeah, you can see that, well, here we have now the new logo, the new design, and whatever you need to change in your business documents. Okay, so this was the first part that we want to show you, where you can just realize some simple design changes and updates through this dynamic binding of electronic reports. So that's the key, binding the company logo with this one. But let me go to the PowerPoint, because there is an alternative way, and Yevgen did that together with his wife in a blog post. Maybe Yevgen, you want to spend some words on that?
Yep. So it's not actually alternative way. It's more like addition way. So first option that you just saw is a linking document logo to a company logo. But out of the box, you have also a branding setup. It's available with modern business forms. So you can, there's a docs article where you can read about modern business forms. It's a new design for SSRS documents, and you need to install those SSRS documents. However, out of the box, just standard, you have a branding setup. And in this, under this branding setup, you can set up your brand. And for different documents, you can set header logo, footer logo, address, telephone, fax, and so on and so forth. So this blog post shows you how you can link electronic reports back to those branding setups. And in the end of the day, you can say that my sales invoice document will have that logo. My delivery note will have different logo. And you don't need to do any changes in the code or electronic report format. You just go update your brand with a new image, and all your documents get a new logo or a new brand. And you can just follow the link and take step by step. Yep.
Yeah, so really it's we highly recommend also to take a look at this blog post here and what Clever AX shared here. It's really worthwhile because there are so many possibilities that you have, and it depends on your business scenario what is maybe the best solution for you. So please take a look at this. But let us continue with the second part. So in the first part, we just showed you how you can dynamically bind a kind of document. And now the second part is about, well, what happens if you have multiple companies? What happens if you need to make these changes not only in one company, but in 10, 15, or 20, or even 100 companies? Then the question is, well, do you have to go into the legal entity form and change the picture each and every time manually? Well, that's possibly not the best way unless you have a lot of time. And one solution for that is we can leverage SharePoint, and I call it Flow, but it's basically Power Automate, so the Power Platform. And let me quickly show you what we are doing here. So the idea in the following is that we don't want to go into the electronic reporting workspace. We don't want to jump into the legal entity where we can see our logo. Maybe because we do not have access to it. Maybe because there are too many companies to make all these changes manually. So what we decided to do is, okay, let's create a SharePoint site or a OneDrive business site where we can put a picture. And the picture that I put is this one here. So let's quickly download. It should be the old one that we used for the first demo. So this one, I want to bring this picture in for multiple companies, for all of them that I have. Yeah? And then the question is, how can I realize that? Yeah? And of course, the answer is, if we have the picture on SharePoint and we know a bit about Power Automate and the Power Platform, then we can leverage Flow or Power Automate for that purpose. And what I did here is I created a simple flow. And this one is even triggered manually. So I have only a couple of companies for which I want to execute this change, and you can use different kind of triggers, different kind of methodologies how to start that. But basically what this element is doing is takes the picture from the SharePoint site. So we get this, and then we update a record. And this update of the records looks at the company images and the company logos. And Yevgen will, after this short demo, tell something about it, how it works, because this entity is not available by default. It's created by Yevgen, but it helps us to overcome this issue. And maybe let's just run this flow. So I just test run it. It should take only a couple of seconds, and I run it for one single company, for USMF now. I run it and I say done. Then it goes through all of these steps, updates the picture in the company selected. And once I create a new free text invoice, then of course, the expectation is that we see this Star Wars logo. So the one we used in the first case. So let us directly try that and simply create a new free text invoice for our customer. So that was the customer we used. So we create a new one. And if we post that one, and again use here the print management, then the expectation is that of course, we see now the Star Wars logo. Again, that was posted on SharePoint. So that's the old invoice. And if the new one opens, you can see that we have automatically changed the design of our business documents just with this update. Okay, so the key to all of that is, of course, a custom entity that Yevgen created. Yevgen, do you want to spend a couple of words on that?
Unfortunately, there is no entity out of the box, so we have to create one. It's available on a GitHub, so there is a link on the slides and you will get them later, so anyone can download it and use. And this entity is really similar to standard entities that you have for document attachment. And if you want, you can follow the same approach to upload not only the company logo, you can grab a product image from a SharePoint and attach it to a product itself. An approach would be exactly the same. So on this slide, key point here is that you don't see it, but in a bitmap formula, it's not directly file content from a previous SharePoint step. You need to convert it to base 64 string using base 64 formula, as is shown in the slide. And because FNO itself stores images in a base 64 string, any attachment. And you will need this string if you want to upload product images or attach a document to sales order, for example, using Power Automate.
Okay. Yeah. So here, if you look at the screen print, you will see file content only. But if you click on that and if you look at the equation, then you have to make sure that you use this expression to make this nicely work. And of course, here, please check out the GitHub site that Yevgen created, where you can use that and download it for free if you like. But now let's come to a third application of this functionality, and where it gets a bit, hopefully, funny and interesting for users. So the question that we have, what is it that we can do else with this custom entity? I mean, Yevgen already created that, and there are many finance people who want to see maybe some finance data that are more or less updating how the company is performing. And well, what we thought is, okay, we can use the same entity and the same approach for updating actually our company's dashboard. And let me quickly show you that here in my machine. So if I open my machine, you will have noticed that on top I have this banner. It says, okay, total sales divided by total assets today and the previous month. And if I update that, then this data will be permanently updated. Let me show you that by recording some invoices with a large data. So with a large invoice amount, it changes this one. So let us quickly create a new free text invoice. So I jump to the same customer, and now I really create an invoice for a couple of millions, let's say, so that we can easily see the change, what is going on. Let's say 15 million, and then post this invoice. I don't want to print it now because I just want to create a new open position that updates my total sales. So the expectation is that this total sales to total asset ratio will change. And before this will usually here update every minute. So while waiting, let me explain what we have done and how this will be updated. So first of all, we started with an electronic report. And the electronic report, we called it KPI. So this report here is basically just extracting some very basic data from Dynamics. And in our case, we just selected something simple that hopefully everybody can follow. So we just said, okay, we need 4 elements to calculate the total sales to total asset ratio as of today and as of last month. So these are these 4 elements that are here included. The data source that we used is just the asset trends and the cost trends table. But because we do not want to have the individual customer and asset transaction records, we use here this group by function. The group by function is something you can calculate yourself. So you say here group by, add, edit, and then you can do some calculations. And the calculation that we did is very simple. So if I show you the formula in the equation, we just calculate the total asset amount, the amount MST in our case. Yeah. And we did that for all of the elements. So we did that for these 4 elements, just the same formula. And once we had that, we linked the data source in the middle to the 4 cells that we wanted to extract. Yeah. So as an example, I have here my aggregated value, amount MST. I click on that and I say bind. That's how this works. But at this point, we do not have any linkage to the period because remember we said we want to have it for the current period and for the previous months. Yeah. So the question is then, how can we get in these periods? And the answer is we decided to use a filter. And the filter is applied in this configuration. So let me show you what this configuration is doing. It is basically taking the data from the model. So that's what I just showed you. So here we have our total assets. Here we have our customer records, the total sales. And in this Excel document, we have 2 cells. The first one says total sales to total assets today. The other one says last month. And if you look at the equation, it is just a simple division. Element A by this divided by this one. So there's nothing really sophisticated with that. What might be interesting is how the Excel document looks like. Because in the previous demos, we showed you how the free text invoice looks like and other invoice documents. And this document that we attached here is just a blank Excel document that has here a text and then 2 values only. So one says 99%, the other 57%. And these are the values that shall be updated by this electronic report. Okay, but now we have here an electronic report and an Excel document, but we want to update our dashboard. So the question is then how do we get it there and how do we update this one? And well, the answer is as follows. So once you have the electronic report configured, there is something called electronic reporting output destination. So for this report, we say, okay, please convert this report into a PDF document and then put it on a SharePoint site. And what this report is then doing, if we just go back for a second, the report is basically run every minute in my case. So I clicked here on run, and then I said, okay, here's the output destination. Here is a recurrence and run this report every minute. It's not 10 minutes, it's every minute in my case. And to filter for the different periods, I use here for the fixed asset transactions, a date range. And the same is applied when I look for the customer transactions. So here are the filters coming in that select the 4 different data sources that we have. The result of all of that is then a PDF report that is posted here on this SharePoint site. But then still, the question is, we have now a PDF, but we want to put it to our dashboard. And the question is also here, how can we realize that? And of course, we can use another flow for that. And let me quickly show you how this one is configured. So this is the second flow that I'm running. And it basically runs every minute and takes the new data. But what this is doing is getting a trigger when an email arrives, and this email is sent when the electronic report is finished. So whenever this electronic report is run, we grab the content of this PDF document and then extract the image from PDF. And please note that this is a separate connector that you need to get out a nice image. There are many others that we tried, but they kind of blur the image. So we use this one from Encodian. And then the second step is, okay, we extract the file, we get the file content, and then we use again the connector from Yevgen to update the file content. So let us go back into our dynamics. So this was our old session. And now just let's refresh this side. And the expectation is that this total sales to total asset ratio is different. So you see that posting this free text invoice for 15 million now made our total sales to total asset ratio that high. And if I would continue posting and refreshing the site, you would see changes in the data as you go. And this is just an example, the total sales to total asset ratio. So you can use any kind of data that you want to kind of show people as they work and how the company is performing by this kind of process. Okay, so that was the part for the business documents and how you can update it dynamically, and what other things you can do with this connector from Yevgen. But now let us switch the sessions because Yevgen wants to show you how you can import and reconcile bank statements also with electronic reporting. So Yevgen, you want to share your screen?
Take the screen now. I need. Tell me if you can see it.
Yes, I can see that.
That's awesome. So that's the last part of our session, and now we will look at bank statement import, how you can do it using electronic reporting. What is the issue? Out of the box, in IX, old versions of IX, and in FNO, you have support of 3 different formats. That's MT 940, ISO, and BAA2. Those 3 formats are supported using data entity that exists, several data entities that exist out of the box. And that's it. But in countries, you have different banks with different formats. And if your bank doesn't support one of those 3 formats, you still need somehow to import this data. And in my case here in New Zealand, one of our banks, BNZ, doesn't support those formats, so we have to develop it, and we will look at this particular example. So what is the solution? You can either use data entities. Those data entities out of the box, they come with XSOT transformation that allows you to transform data from source files like MT940 to a format the data entity accepts, and then it will use standard data management to input data. You can go the same way, but in this case, you need to know how to write those transformations, and it's impossible if you are not a developer that has right skills to do that. Second option, and we will look at it today, is to use electronic reporting. So there is one format out of the box as well. You can use it as an example, and you already have a data model and mapping that you can reuse to do the import. And now let's look how it works in AX or if not. First of all, you have to do a setup in a cash and bank management. Here you have bank statement formats. You need to create a new record, and you give it a name, you give it a description, and now you have 2 options. If you want to go with the legacy way and use data management, data entity, and your transformation, you select a processing group. So you go to data management, create an import project, add all the entities, apply transformation. Those transformations could be found, standard transformation could be found in a Visual Studio as a resource. So you open Visual Studio, get a resource. There is a good documentation on a doc site, step-by-step, how to do it. So you create import group under data management, select it here, and you're good to go. If you want to go with electronic reporting, you tick that box saying that this import will use electronic reporting. And now you have here in drop-down, you select a format that you created. That one, we will look at it now. That's my custom format to handle B and Z. And one down is a standard format that exists. And it's really good because we can use it as an example in our development. So first step is to configure bank statement format. Second one is actually create your bank account. That's my demo bank account. Standard setup, you specify main account, bank account number, put a name, currency, etc. If you want to use input, you have to enable that tick box, advanced bank reconciliation. Please note that if you enable it, you cannot disable it anymore. So don't do it in production. Test it first in your test UAT environment. Yep. And second important field here is a bank group. On a bank group, you define currency, bank name in the statement, and statement format. And that's format that we previously created. So you create a bank group, define those fields, select bank group on a bank account, and it will initialize all the required fields for you. Yeah, that's it. So now let's look at the file I have, sample file, and we will import in a second. That's a GIFT format that our bank use. It's similar to CSV format, but and it's similar to other formats as well. It has similar structure. So first field is a record type. 3 is a transaction, 5 is opening balance, 6 is closing balance, 8 is total debit, and 9 is total credit. Yep. So then you have a dummy field that is not used. That's a bank account number, that's amount, and then you have other information like date, name of name particular, code, and so on and so forth. Interesting thing here that in the bottom of a file, we have a foreign payment information, and it comes in a different format. Yep. So it's not a standard way when you have two different data in a different format in the same file, but electronic reporting still can handle it. And I will show you how you can process only data required, your bank statement transactions, and ignore everything else. Okay. So that's our file. Let's import it first, and then we will look at how it works. So you go to bank statement, click import statement. Because we already selected our bank group and it initialized all the fields, now it knows bank account, statement format, and so on. It allows you to select multiple bank accounts. So if you check that box, your bank statement file can have data for multiple bank accounts. Now you need to select a file, take our file, upload it. Yeah, before you click OK, there is another tick box here. You can say that you can reconcile file statement manually, or you can try to automatically reconcile it after the input. So if you want to do automatic reconciliation, just tick the box. So let's import it. Okay. So it's imported successfully, no errors. It created a new statement, and here we can see our opening balance from line number 5, ending balance, transaction details, reference, dates, amounts, and so on and so forth. So it's successfully imported. Now let's go and look at electronic reporting to see how it works. We go to opening electronic reporting workspace, selecting our configuration. Here we have that standard format I mentioned before. If you go and into electronic reporting, open LCS asset library, then you can import that one. When you import a format, it will bring you standard bank statement model and bank statement mapping to destination. You don't need to change them. At least in my case, I didn't change anything there. It was just standard. I took whatever Microsoft provides. Obviously, you can create your derived configuration if you need to do any changes and import any custom fields or change something, but it's really good. So you don't really need it to change it in most cases. That's my demo format. Let's look at it. So format in electronic reporting explains how to read incoming file, how to parse it, and then you map that format to a model, passing data from a file back to tables behind, or in our case, data entities. Let's make it side by side. So in a file, we have different line types. As I mentioned before, 3 is its transaction, 5 opening balance, closing balance, total debit, total credit, and some data that we want to skip. In our format has similar structure. First of all, we have a file. In a file, we define data time and number in format. Because, in US and UK, you have different date formats. So here you can specify what is your date format, what is your number formats, language preferences, and so on and so forth. Yep. Then the second section is a root. In a root, you specify what is the delimiter between file lines. In our case, it's just a new line. So we have a new line after each line. Here we say our delimiter is a new line, so it will know that each line, how to split lines in a file. Okay. Second one is just a placeholder for a line. Here we say that there is at least one line in the file. If file won't have any lines, you will get an error saying that it's invalid file. Then we have a case. Case is an important one. Case explains how to identify different lines and parse them. So for example, we have line that's called record 3. First field is actually a field case looks at. So it has predefined value 3. And how it works, it goes, reads the first line, checks what is the first field. If it's 3, it will try to use this sequence to parse the line. If it's not 3, it will look at second one. Record type looks, okay, it's 5. Let's try this sequence of fields to parse the line. If it's not 5, it goes to 6, 9, 8, 9, and so on. Yep. If it cannot match first portion of a line before comma, it will try to use this line. This one doesn't have any fixed value, so everything that doesn't match 3, 5, 6, 8, or 9 will go here. And using this technique, we will just cut this section because we don't need it. It is not as bank statement information. It's a foreign payment and we cannot import it, so we want to ignore it. But if we want to do this section, it will just fail with an error because it cannot parse it. Yeah. So another important thing here is a delimiter. So here we specify that our fields, our values in a line separated by comma. So here on the root level, we're saying that all the lines are separated by a new line. And then for each individual line, we're saying that it's separated by comma. It's configurable, so you can go and say semicolon in case you are working with a semicolon separated file. It could be pipe, it could be anything. If you don't specify a delimiter, it's okay because some bank files, they are not delimited, they have a fixed length. For example, first 5 characters is a bank account, then next 10 positions is amount, and so on and so forth. So if you don't specify a delimiter, here in each individual field, you can put minimum and maximum length. That's how electronic reporting recognizes data in a file and put it in a proper variable. Yep. So let's look at the records 3. First one is value, that's our 3. Then we have subscriber ID. It's just a dummy. That's how this particular format works. It doesn't have any value. So we put it in this variable. Next one is account number. That's account number. Then we have amount, and so on. And you can notice that different record type has different set of fields. And that's okay. So it's supported. Another important, probably most important thing I want to talk about here is a quotation. Different files have different way to define string values. So here, for example, strings are quoted. Yep. And if you want to recognize all quoted strings as a string and don't have quotes because you don't need them in incoming information, you can say your quotation application text only. So it will look at string. If it's quoted, then it will parse it as a string and remove quotes, so you don't have it in your data anymore. In my case, I don't use it because 3 is not a string, is a number, but case does not work with numbers. That record type should be string. Yep, unfortunately. So if it would be like that in a file, I can use quotations and I don't need to manually remove quotes after that. Yep, so that's our format. Second part is actually how you map format back to model. As I mentioned before, format has been developed to parse this particular file, and it can work not only with CSV or text files, it can work with XMLs, for example. And if you look at standard one that you have, Chem3, it takes some time to open it. It actually works with XML and it has completely different structure. So this variables is actually text from an XML. So you can parse text files, you can parse XMLs, or it could be Excel spreadsheet as well. So it supports multiple formats. Going back to format, so format explains how to import a file, how to parse it. Now we need to map it back to our data. We go into the mapping. So here on the right-hand side, we have a standard model provided by Microsoft, and this model can be reused by multiple formats. That's what I'm doing. I'm having my custom demo format, and there is another one, standard XML format as well. They are still mapped to the same model. Behind this model, you have different data entities, one data entity for header, another one for lines, and so on and so forth. Yep. But you don't really need to know and worry about it because it's already created by Microsoft. So you, as a user or developer or functional consultant, can focus all your efforts on a format to parse a file and then how to map it back to model. And you don't need to know anything about tables behind, about their structure, how they are related. You don't need to know system fields. That could be confusing because here in a model, you have more like a business terms that makes more sense. So first of all, here you have fields. You have set of fields related to import. Important one here is a message identification. It should be unique, and usually it's something unique in a file, or maybe name of the file. In my case, I don't have anything, so I'm just using import datetime up to seconds to make it unique. Also, here you have a format name. It's predefined because it's our format, and a version of a format. You can have multiple versions of the same format. Then you have statement details here. That's your statement header. From date, to date, that's the section for statement when, lines, bank account, and currency. Currency is predefined because, again, in my file, bank doesn't supply any currency because it expects you to use only one New Zealand dollars, but you need it for your statement, so you just hard code it. Yep. So let's look at opening balance. There are several important fields. One is a balance amount. In a bank statement itself, you have two fields. One is amount, another one is a sign. So what we do here, we take absolute value, and then we calculate a sign saying if balance in our format is greater than 0, then that's debit. Otherwise, it's credit. Same story with the closing balance. Same situation. We have record 6 that is closing balance. Now we are taking absolute value of closing balance that we pass from a file, and then we do the same trick to figure out if it's a debit or credit, looking at the sign. Yep. Now we have here statement lines, and here we look at records with type 3. As I mentioned before, record type with type 3 is a transaction line, and we do exactly the same. We take absolute value, we calculate a sign, we are taking field data reference as a reference to populate it. Format itself, standard data model, allows you to have remittance part, but we don't have any data in a file to populate it. Unfortunately, bank doesn't provide it, so we just populate it with an empty list. And we don't have any statuses, so we just hard code it to booked. Otherwise, it won't work. Yep. So once again, you have out of the box model that is mapped back to data entities and tables. You don't really need to know a lot about it. It just usually works. All you need to do to import your bank statement is to develop your own format that can parse incoming file, and it could be XML, it could be CSV, it could be Excel file. Then you map this format back to model, and you're good to go. You can import your bank statements and then automatically reconcile them. I think that's it on the bank statement. Now we are moving to questions.
Yevgen, there was a question in the chat about error handling with the import.
Error handling. Oh, okay. I can go back to that. So, what sort of error handling? You can, first of all, when you define your format, here you can say if lines are mandatory or no. That's your multiplicity. So you can say that you can have many lines with, so 0 lines or many lines with 3. You can say that there is only exactly one line with type 3 or at least one line. That's how you validate your file for valid structure. The same happens with fields. When you define a field here, placeholder, you have the same multiplicity. So you can say if field is mandatory or not. So if you say 01, it could be optional. It could be blank in a file, and file would be successfully parsed, at least by a format. If you leave multiplicity by empty, it expects you to, it says that field is mandatory, and it should be always filled in a file. For example, if you're importing statement and there is no bank account, you cannot do anything with it, so you want to fail shortly. That's the first step, but here you validate more structure of a file, not data. You don't do any data validation. And then when you go to actually map into destination, I think. Here you have validation as well. That's a standard validation. I don't want to go into details, but what it does here, it actually checks that bank account from a statement exists. And you can write some sort of code. It's like Excel-based formulas, where you can say, where you can call methods in AX or do like find in a table and check if this customer exists in the system, if this customer has a flag ticked, and so on and so forth. So you can write a lot of validations here, and it will validate data before inserting to a target tables or data entities. And then you can put nice friendly messages saying that bank account doesn't exist, for example. And it even supports labels, so you can have error messages on different languages, so English, German, so on and so forth. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah, I think that was one. Can you also share the import, how we import it from SharePoint, just the path probably?
Imported from, I didn't import it from, I imported from a file, but import from SharePoint would be similar to what Ludwig showed. Yeah, you can have your file in SharePoint, then you can set up a destination as a SharePoint. You cannot do straight SharePoint. What it used document attachment. So it used document attachment. You stop a document attachment, select a SharePoint folder. Yes, then you run it. When you run it, you select a destination, and you can select if you want to run it instantly or you want to have a batch job and recurrently pick up files.
So the user basically have to upload a file somewhere, and then the batch job is permanently checking if there's something new, and then importing that.
If configured, let me check if I have configured any destinations. Sources, sorry. No, I don't. But here you can create a new source, select a format, new source, put a name. In the settings, it asks you for a document type. So you go to document management, set up a document type. The document type will look at the folder, and here you can set one. I don't have any document type set up, sorry for this demo. And then you configure it. When you run an input, you select this destination. And here you have even a form that shows you all files available in this destination. So if you configured a document management folder to look at SharePoint site or a folder, select it in the previous setting, previous screen. Here you will see all files, and then there would be a history saying if file was successfully imported or it failed. Even more, when you set up those destinations, you have 4 different folders. So you can set up folder for your input files. It's like a queue. Yep. If you look at that folder, you set up a batch job. That would be recurrency 5, 10 each minute, each 5 minutes, each 10 minutes. It will look at files in this folder. Yep. Try to process them. Then second folder you can configure for successfully imported files. So if file is successfully imported, it will move it from a folder, from a queue folder to imported folder on SharePoint. So you won't pick it up second time. If file is failed, you can set up another folder for failed files, and it will move it to that folder. So you can go and review what is wrong with file, maybe correct it, and move it back to input folder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have another question. I cannot answer it. Maybe you can, Yevgen. The question is, can electronic signatures be mapped with the electronic reporting? I don't know that.
Honestly, I don't know the answer.
Yeah, maybe Amr, who sent us this question, maybe we can check later on by sending and changing emails. Maybe we can do it that way.
Details. If you can drop this question to either me or Ludwig, we can look at it and come back to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions?
There is another one by Syed. Based on the data in the incoming file, can we write any logic to take decisions based on that or update any data in the table?
Yeah, of course. So in a format, okay, we'll jump back to the screen. In a format here, format, where's my format? When you map it back to model, you actually have its language, from your language is really similar to Excel. I think it was inspired by Excel, so people who are familiar with Excel can make those decisions. And when I was talking about balances, so what happens here? Let me take some time. I have a formula here, and it says if it's matched, because field is not mandatory in my case, so it always have a field saying matched or not. If it's matched, then it was in a file populated. If it's not matched, then it's not there and it's null or incorrect value. So here we're saying if it was matched, and if balance is greater than 0, then make that field in a table, populate this field in a table with enum value debit. If it's else, then use credit. So you have an if statement, and using if statement, you can make decisions saying if data is something, if data is greater than 0, then that value. If it's less than 0, then another value. And you can build quite complex formulas. You have switch, you have case, you have if. So there is a formula language available for you, and it's used to make decisions based on data in a file and either take it or do something or transform it somehow, or take it from a different source.
Okay, good. There are 2 more questions. Any documentation with syntax to write these formulas? There is a Microsoft Docs site that gives you some examples how to write these formulas and expressions. So please have a look at that one.
Yep. So
and the other,
yeah, go ahead.
The other question is, can any documents letter be generated for employees, workers? Is from Rizwan. Yeah, it depends on the document.
Sorry, I want to finish with the first one. So here in the right hand side, you have formulas. You have a help here available. So it shows what is the values, what is the formula type. And then when you write a formula, first of all, it gives you errors. Yep, and you can test it. And when you test it, you can test this one, sorry, but if it's a simple form, you can test it. It will pop up a window with the values, so you can enter test values and run it. And here in the test results, you will see what this formula returns. So if you want to do if field something, then A or B, you can test it. It will pop up a window where you will enter manually the field value, and it will show you a result. So you have documentation here, you have test results. It will validate a formula before you will try to save it. And on docs, you have lots of articles about those formulas with examples and use cases as well.
So, and one of the last questions that I had was about MT940 file format. And this is just something where Yevgen and I work on. So it's just work in progress. And we want to demonstrate this process and import with these file formats in a different form. We want to put it in ledger journals once we are finished with that. So please stay tuned. Just follow us, what Yevgen and me post, and then we will get these updates.
Yeah, but important to note that we will have another session to show how to get it into ledger journal, but we already done that work to build electronic reporting format to parse data. Yeah, and that's really the matter where you insert this data. In our next session, we will insert it into ledger journal, but you can easily map it to the same standard model I showed you. Because there are two different ways. First way is a format. You just define how to parse data, read a file into variables. And second one is model and mapping to model where you actually insert, push data from variables back to tables and entities. So once you have a format, you know how to deal with files, MT940 or other formats, and then you can decide if you want to insert this data to GL journal, to bank statement, and so on and so forth. It's completely two separate processes.
Okay, so we are on top of the hour. So thank you.